A man dipped his hand into wet paint and slowly dragged it across the side of a shoe. And just like that, the famous three-stripe logo of Adidas was born. But the reason behind it was surprisingly personal. He only created it because his own brother had started a rival brand called Puma. What most people do not realize is that nearly a century ago, Adidas and Puma were once the exact same company. Back in 1924, Adi Dassler was just an ordinary cobbler living in Germany. He spent most of his days alone in his backyard workshop, experimenting with handmade athletic shoes. But despite all his effort, he had never managed to sell a single pair. To everyone around him, he looked like a dreamer wasting his time. Everyone except his older brother, Rudy. Unlike Adi, Rudy was confident, outgoing, and naturally good with people. He worked as a sales manager at a factory and carried himself like someone destined for success. And whenever somebody insulted Adi or mocked his ideas, Rudy would immediately defend him. No one was allowed to disrespect his little brother. Still, as the years passed, even Adi began losing faith in himself. He had always dreamed of seeing world-class athletes standing on podiums while wearing his shoes. But at that point, it felt impossible. Nobody seemed interested in buying special shoes just for sports. That was when Rudy made a life-changing decision. He quit his stable job and told Adi they should build a factory together. Adi would focus entirely on designing and making shoes, while Rudy would take care of selling them. The very next day, the two brothers founded the Dassler Shoe Factory, the company that would later evolve into Adidas. This is Adidas versus Puma, the brothers' feud. But success did not come easily. Germany was still struggling after losing World War I, and the economy was collapsing. Businesses everywhere were shutting down, and banks refused to lend money to risky new companies like theirs. On top of that, people back then believed shoes were supposed to be thick, heavy, and durable enough to last for years. Adi's athletic shoes were the complete opposite. They were lightweight, flexible, and built for movement. To most people, they looked fragile and impractical. After getting rejected by the bank, Adi was furious. He hated hearing people dismiss the work he had poured his heart into. But Rudy stayed calm and told him to keep focusing on the shoes while he figured out the business side himself. The next day, Rudy loaded an entire cart with Adi's athletic shoes and headed straight to the local sports grounds. Instead of trying to convince people with words, he let them wear the shoes and experience the difference for themselves. And immediately, people noticed it. The rubber studs on the soles gave athletes better grip, while the soft leather made the shoes lighter and more comfortable to move in. Rudy understood every detail because he had watched his brother obsess over these designs for years. That afternoon, when Rudy returned home, every single one of the 273 pairs he had brought with him was completely sold out. People could not stop talking about the shoes, and as word spread across town, demand exploded. Rudy immediately started putting up notices looking for more workers because the small workshop could no longer keep up with production. While Rudy focused on growing the business, Adi was already chasing his next big idea. He began developing a new line of athletic shoes using softer materials for better comfort and flexibility. But there was one major problem. The studs on the soles kept coming loose. Then Adi came up with a strange but brilliant solution. He ripped the tires off his brother's Mercedes and used the rubber to strengthen the studs on the shoes. Unfortunately, the new models still were not as reliable as the originals. Complaints started piling up and customers began returning the shoes in huge numbers. Rudy finally lost patience. He believed Adi was trying too hard to reinvent something that already worked. In his eyes, customers wanted dependable shoes, not risky experiments. It was the first serious disagreement the brothers had ever faced. Adi was left stunned. Up until that moment, the two brothers had always stood side by side. What he did not realize was that this would only be the beginning of many future conflicts. A few years later, Adi's shoes had become incredibly popular across Germany. Athletes everywhere were wearing them, and the brothers' business was thriving. Around the same time, both men also found love and got married. But even their personal lives revealed how different they truly were. Rudy was still flirting with women during his own wedding celebration, while Adi carefully handcrafted a special pair of athletic shoes as a gift for his bride. As the company continued growing, the brothers once again tried to secure a bank loan. Rudy wanted Adi to attend the meeting with him, but Adi hated formal business discussions and refused to go. Eventually, Adi's wife stepped in and accompanied Rudy instead. This time, they finally succeeded. When they returned home with the good news, Rudy became so excited that he lifted his sister-in-law out of the car in celebration. But his wife happened to witness the moment and immediately became suspicious.
Den Finger! Wir haben Champagner mitgebracht. Trinkst du auch? Und zwar den kleinen. Holst uns welche.
Thanks to the loan, the brothers transformed their small workshop into a real factory. Even the national team coach attended the grand opening ceremony. Everything seemed to be moving perfectly for the Dassler brothers. Then one day, Adi's wife made an unusual request. She asked him to create a tiny pair of athletic shoes. At first, Adi looked confused, but then he suddenly understood. He was going to become a father. Overjoyed, he rushed downstairs to share the news with Rudy. But instead of celebrating, Rudy and his wife exchanged strange expressions. What Adi did not know was that Rudy's marriage had already been falling apart for years. Rudy had grown tired of his domestic life and felt emotionally disconnected from his wife. Meanwhile, Adi's wife was lively, confident, and full of energy, exactly the kind of personality that naturally attracted him. She quickly noticed the way Rudy looked at her and repeatedly warned him to keep his distance. Rudy agreed, but unfortunately his wife witnessed one of those moments herself. From that point on, jealousy and suspicion quietly began growing inside her. The very next day, Rudy's wife confronted her sister-in-law directly. She accused her of trying to destroy her marriage and warned that if things continued, she would expose the relationship between her and Rudy. But Adi's wife was not intimidated at all. Everyone in town already knew that Rudy constantly chased other women. In her eyes, his wife simply refused to accept reality and was looking for someone else to blame instead. That confrontation changed everything. At that moment, Rudy's wife became convinced that the only way to protect her marriage was to separate the two families completely. And to do that, she needed to drive the brothers apart. Slowly, she began whispering doubts into Rudy's ear. She pointed out that everyone praised Adi's shoes while Rudy rarely received any recognition. She warned him that if the brothers ever split up, Adi and his wife could easily take over the company and leave him with nothing. At first, Rudy ignored those ideas. But over time, the words started sinking deeper into his mind. Then one day, the brothers argued over pricing for a new shoe model. Rudy wanted to lower the price to increase sales, but Adi strongly disagreed. Adi's wife pushed things even further by suggesting they raise the price instead, believing expensive shoes would strengthen Adi's reputation as the best shoemaker in Germany. The moment she said that, all of Rudy's insecurities suddenly came rushing back. For the first time, he completely lost his temper in front of everyone and lashed out at his sister-in-law. The atmosphere instantly turned cold. Even Rudy realized he had crossed the line. Trying to calm things down, he quickly shifted the conversation toward Olympic sponsorships. But Adi was no longer interested in smoothing things over. He warned Rudy never to speak harshly to his wife again. Then another disagreement emerged almost immediately. Rudy wanted the company to sponsor an Aryan athlete who had a strong chance of winning gold at the Olympics. But Adi had someone else in mind, a black athlete whose talent stood out far above everyone else. At the time, Germany's political climate had become extremely dangerous. Supporting a black athlete over an Aryan competitor could easily attract backlash from the authorities. Rudy understood the risk immediately, but Adi did not care about politics. He only cared about his lifelong dream of seeing elite athletes win while wearing his shoes. Ignoring all the warnings, Adi secretly traveled to the Olympic venue himself and personally handed a pair of shoes to the athlete he believed in. And in the end, Adi was right. The athlete dominated the competition, won the gold medal, and even broke an Olympic record while wearing Adi's shoes. But at the same time, Rudy's fears also became reality. The German military was furious that a non-Aryan athlete had become the star of the Olympics on German soil. Soon after, the authorities ordered the Dassler factory to shut down. Rudy exploded in anger. He had spent years building the company from nothing, surviving rejection after rejection, and fighting to sell hundreds of thousands of shoes. And now, because of Adi's decision, everything they had worked for seemed ready to collapse. But Adi fired back immediately. In his mind, Rudy may have sold the shoes, but he was the one who had actually created them. Without his designs, there would have been nothing to sell in the first place. And just like that, another deep crack formed between the two brothers.
Meine Gesamtbetriebsstelle, kompletter Schluss.
Wir fahren nach Berlin zum Minister.
In order to reopen the factory, Rudy was forced to cooperate with the military. The deal required the brothers to produce 6,000 pairs of army boots every month without payment. It was the only way to keep the business alive. But even during a crisis like this, Adi refused to compromise. He still wanted to focus entirely on athletic shoes and had no interest in making military equipment. As a result, Rudy secretly had workers manufacture the army boots at night without Adi's involvement. But the boots turned out so poorly made that the military eventually canceled the agreement themselves. Oddly enough, Rudy's wife did not seem worried at all. By then, she cared less about the future of the factory and more about keeping her husband close to her. Whether the business survived or collapsed no longer mattered to her. What she never expected was the consequence of losing that military contract. One of the brothers would now have to go to war. Rudy believed Adi should be the one to leave. In his mind, the factory needed someone capable of handling sales and keeping the company alive. But Adi argued the opposite. To him, creating the shoes mattered far more than selling them. For the first time, Adi seemed completely defeated. The fight had drained out of him, and he quietly accepted his fate. But when the recruiters finally arrived the next day, it was Rudy who stepped forward instead. Deep down, he still remembered his role as the older brother. No matter how much tension existed between them, he could not bring himself to send Adi away to war. Soon after, the conflict escalated into full-scale war across Europe. The brothers' shoe factory was transformed into a munitions plant, and Rudy was forced to shoulder the burden alone. To survive, he had to learn how to negotiate, how to obey orders, and how to fight when necessary. Ironically, without even noticing it, he slowly became more and more like Adi himself. The pressure was overwhelming. Only when Rudy put on a pair of athletic shoes could he briefly reconnect with the dreams he once shared with his brother. But the war surrounding him made one thing painfully clear. In times like these, dreams no longer seemed to matter. By 1945, Germany had officially lost the war. Rudy was fortunate enough to return home alive, but everything had changed. The bond between the brothers was weaker than ever, and their town soon fell under Allied occupation. Before long, Allied soldiers targeted the factory because it had been used to produce weapons during the war. They planned to destroy it completely. Desperate to save the company, Adi explained that he had originally been a simple shoemaker who had been forced into military production. He guided the soldiers through the building, showing them shelves filled with athletic shoes in an attempt to prove his innocence. But the deeper the soldiers searched, the more military equipment they uncovered. There was no denying the factory had supported the war effort. Just as the situation seemed hopeless, Adi's wife suddenly brought out a photo album. Inside were pictures of Adi alongside legendary Olympic athlete Jesse Owens. The Allied officer immediately recognized him. The soldiers realized that Jesse Owens had won his medals while wearing Adi's shoes, and that connection completely changed the atmosphere. At the same time, Adi explained that the military had forced them to manufacture anti-tank weapons during the war. In the end, the officers decided not to destroy the factory. Everyone finally felt a wave of relief. The company had survived once again, but the peace did not last long. Soon after, Rudy was suddenly taken away for questioning after someone accused him of being a military collaborator. Rudy was shocked, but the look on the interrogator's face immediately planted suspicion in his mind. Right then and there, he became convinced that Adi had betrayed him. Determined to strike back at his brother, Rudy completely reversed the story during the investigation. He claimed that sponsoring the black Olympic athlete had actually been his idea all along, and that decision was the reason he had been sent to war in the first place. Then he shifted the blame entirely onto Adi. According to Rudy, after he left for the front lines, Adi had personally transformed the shoe factory into a weapons plant. In his eyes, that made Adi the true collaborator. Soon after, Adi was taken in for questioning as well. The two brothers began accusing each other of betrayal, each trying to protect himself while dragging the other down. But after a full investigation, authorities eventually ruled that both men were innocent. Even so, the damage had already been done. Whatever trust still remained between the brothers was completely destroyed. When they finally returned home, tensions exploded into a massive confrontation. Years of resentment, jealousy, and bitterness all came crashing out at once. And right in the middle of it, Rudy's wife delivered the final blow. She accused Adi's wife and Rudy of having an affair for years, and even claimed they had secretly raised a child together. Adi was completely shattered by the accusation. His wife desperately tried to explain herself, but Rudy's silence only made everything feel even more suspicious. Whether it was true or not no longer mattered. At that moment, The brothers' relationship had already passed the point of repair. For Rudy's wife, it was the outcome she had wanted all along. Now, Rudy belonged entirely to her.
Das Haus in Wahrheit Rudys Sohn ist das. Natürlich nicht.
Sag, dass das nie weiß.
Sag die Wahrheit!
Only a few days later, the factory that had survived economic collapse, political persecution, and World War finally fell apart because of family conflict. The brothers officially split the company in two. Adi kept the factory workers and founded Adidas. Rudy took the sales team and created Puma. From that moment forward, the two companies became bitter rivals. But the split created serious problems for both sides. Rudy quickly discovered that most of his new employees lacked the craftsmanship needed to make high-quality shoes. Complaints from customers started piling up almost immediately, forcing him to hire experienced shoemakers for much higher wages. Meanwhile, Adi faced the opposite problem. He still knew how to create incredible shoes, but Rudy had taken nearly all of the company's business connections and customers with him. No matter how good Adi's designs were, nobody was buying them anymore. So Adi went back to the strategy that had helped them succeed in the beginning. He personally visited sports grounds and allowed athletes to test his shoes themselves, slowly rebuilding the company's reputation from scratch. But before long, another conflict erupted. Puma copied several Adidas designs and then boldly sued Adidas first, dragging Adi into court before he could respond. That was the moment the reality finally became unavoidable. Once Adidas and Puma split apart, they were no longer brothers competing in business. They had become enemies. The next day, Adi received troubling news. The national team coach was about to sign a deal with Puma. Without wasting a second, Adi jumped into his car and rushed to stop it. But by the time he arrived, he was already too late. For a moment, it seemed like Adidas had lost one of its biggest opportunities. Then something unexpected happened. The coach personally came to visit Adi afterward. It turned out he had only considered Puma because Rudy had promised an enormous sponsorship payment. But at the very last moment, Rudy backed out of the deal. The reason was simple. Hungary, Germany's upcoming opponent in the World Cup, had gone 31 matches without a single defeat. Rudy believed Germany had no realistic chance of winning, and he did not want to risk the money on a losing team. Adi thought about it carefully. Then he accepted the sponsorship himself. Only a few days later, Germany shocked the entire world by reaching the World Cup final, and waiting for them on the other side was the unstoppable Hungarian team. On the day of the match, the coach stepped onto the field and quietly hoped for rain. Wet conditions would give Adidas boots a major advantage because of their short studs and stronger grip. As the players prepared in the locker room, the tension kept building. Then suddenly, Adi burst into the room, completely soaked from head to toe. That was when the coach realized the rain had finally started. This was the moment Adi had been waiting for. Against all expectations, Germany went on to win the World Cup. The entire stadium erupted in celebration. People screamed, cheered, and celebrated one of the greatest upsets in football history. Adidas had officially defeated Puma on the world stage. But while everyone else celebrated, Adi felt something very different. Instead of joy, there was a quiet sadness inside him. He understood that Adidas may have won this battle, but rivalries like this never truly end. Sooner or later, the balance would shift again. As the celebration continued around him, Adi slowly walked back toward the locker room, alone, lost in his thoughts. That was when he noticed a small slip of paper waiting for him. Written on it were only a few simple words congratulating him. In that moment, Adi realized Rudy had been there the entire time, silently watching his younger brother achieve the dream they once shared together. There was no anger left in that message, only loneliness. It almost felt as if Rudy had finally fulfilled some unspoken responsibility he had carried for years as the older brother. Even today, if you visit Herzogenaurach, you will find a town forever divided by the rivalry between Adidas and Puma. The river that cuts through the town became a symbol of the brothers themselves. On opposite sides, Adi and Rudy were eventually laid to rest, separated even in death. And perhaps in Adi's final moments, his mind returned to a much simpler memory from long before the fame, the war, and the rivalry. A quiet afternoon, a pair of handmade shoes, and his older brother waiting nearby, offering him a ride home while Adi stubbornly chose to keep running on his own. Neither of them realized it at the time, but maybe that was the exact moment their rivalry truly began. So the moral of the story is sometimes the saddest thing in life is not losing to your enemy, but slowly turning your own brother into one.